Hey everyone, welcome to the Disruption Podcast. I'm Michelle. My pronouns are she, her.
And I'm Tracy. My pronouns are she, they.
And we are really glad you're all with us today for what is one of our most exciting episodes yet. We are really thrilled to have today's guest and share her with you like the gift that she is. So let me take just a moment and introduce our guest so that she can also say hi herself. All right, so today we have the Debbie Phillips, who is the inspiring founder of Women on Fire and also an author, coach, and podcaster, among many of her talents. Debbie is a pioneer in the field of executive and life coaching, having founded Women on Fire in 2003 as a membership community to extend inspiration, strategies, and support for women's successes. Of course, you know how much we love that elevation of women and hold that near and dear to our hearts. So we are among kindred spirits today. Debbie's conducted more than 125 interviews with inspiring women ranging from Gloria Steinem and Vanessa Williams to Carly Simon and Judy Blume. As an author and podcaster, Debbie's credits include the 2-book series, Women on Fire, 20 inspiring women share their life secrets, and save you years of struggle. I'm in for that. And most recently, she is lending her voice to co-hosting the podcast Secrets of the Better Halves with Dan Mulhern and Markos Kounalakis. Sorry, Markos. Where the focus is on how powerful couples manage life together in an intimate partnership. And we've already gotten a few teasers from that podcast that'll be dropping soon, and it's going to be on fire. Debbie also created and co-developed Vision Day, which is a strategic planning day and program that has helped thousands of people live the lives they've dreamed of. Now, prior to becoming a coach, she was also a reporter for the Columbus, Ohio Citizen Journal, deputy press secretary to former U.S. Senator John Glenn during his quest for the Democratic presidential nomination, press secretary to former Ohio Governor Richard F. Celeste, and executive in charge of U.S. Health Productions Company, which featured the internationally syndicated television health and lifestyle show Life Choices. Okay, taking a breath. Debbie has a bachelor's degree in journalism from the Ohio State University and master's degree in public administration from the Kennedy School at Harvard University. She considers, however, her greatest education experience to be the pain, joy, and growth from the ups and downs of life, love, and loss. So welcome, Debbie. We are so thrilled to have this conversation with you. And we're just excited to share your exceptional experience and your mission and your story of disruption with all of our fellow disruptors as we all seek to elevate the voices of women in leadership.
You are so my people. I am so happy and so proud to be on this show with the two of you. Tracy and Michelle, when I met you, I just totally fell in love with both of you. You were so inspiring, and it is such an honor to be on your podcast. So welcome, and welcome to everybody listening.
Likewise, speaking of an inspiration, this is going to be a real treat.
Thanks. Thank you. Excited to be here.
It is. And we fell in love with you too when we met. I think it was the Women's Travel Wisdom, retreat that we were at. So back in, I forget now, you're going to have to remind me, Michelle, where the heck we were in the middle of somewhere in Northern California.
California.
Okay. Thank you, Debbie, because I was going to say,
It was in the mountains where there were earthquakes.
I just remember a really aggressive shuttle ride on a very bumpy bus. Right. And then not taking the shuttle on the way home for obvious reasons. So.
Yeah.
Exactly. But
that was an amazing event. And I got to meet you too. So that was fantastic.
Yes, we love it. And so, the way we start these podcasts out, Debbie, is we ask you what disruption means to you. Why is it meaningful to you to disrupt in the way that you do?
Well, something I think I've always thought of myself as a disruptor. I am just not a go by the rules book kind of person. And I think that I think disrupting to me means the feeling of doing what's right. And it could be the feeling of doing what's right with a human being in front of me, or with an organization, or with a community, with a business, with a company. It's that feeling of, this might be the rule, this might be the way that it's always done, but what if we do something different to make it better? And so the goal always is, how can we make this better, whatever this is? So when I met you and you told me you were going to do this podcast, it was like, oh my gosh, these are women after my own heart, because I think disruption is such a huge key to success, new growth, and innovation. And I'm thrilled to have the podcast.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely. Totally agree with that definition of disruption, what that means to you.
Yeah. And hey, you know what I'd love to do? Because I do think that there's an element of disruption that either people can shy away from, right? Just maybe the connotation of the word. And I think we've also been conditioned often as women to not disrupt, right? I mean, we are like the smoothers, the placaters, we're the keep everyone happiers.
Right.
So Debbie, can you help us all understand? I'd like to let's dig into our bodies, right? So how does, when you talk about how it feels to disrupt, like what does that feel like? How do you know when you're on the right track?
Yeah. What a great question. Because I'm very intuitive. And so I go with my gut, and I know what feels right and what doesn't feel right. And sometimes I need to sit on it a little bit, but it's a feeling for me inside of what feels right. And from coaching the number of people that I've coached over the years, what you just said, Michelle, is so accurate. You know, people are so afraid, one, to put themselves out there. I've been there myself, where it feels like, wow, if I press the send on this and I send out this blog, I'm going to get hate mail, or I'm going to get this, or I'm going to get that. We know what that feeling of fear is like, trying to do what we want to do in the world. And I think disruption is even one step further, because it's really just breaking all the rules, really being fearless around, I can't care about what anybody else thinks. This feels so right to me to make this point, share this thought with the world. So I hope I answered your question.
No, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
No,
Tracy, can I flip that one on you before we move on? You're like the consummate disruptor. What does it feel like in your body when you know you're disrupting in the right way?
Yeah, I think I would describe it very similarly, and I think we feel I talk about intuition all the time. Like intuition's like one of my number one tip, whether I'm talking about safety or I'm talking about anything. Like your intuition is, 99% of the time it's right on. And the first thing that happens when you intuitively feel like I should say something, I should take a stand, I should hit send on this email, is that fear. And that fear that comes up is like, and it's all that conditioning that we've had. And it's all those things we've been told that we should or shouldn't do. It's that feeling of maybe not feeling good enough, or that somebody will even care about what you're doing. And so you have to really work through all of those limiting thoughts. But I tell people, it's not necessarily when you feel that desire to disrupt, and disrupt is not a dirty word. When you feel that desire to do as what, Debbie was saying, this feels like the right thing to do, and you feel it strongly within you to do it, it is the norm, even for all of us who've been disruptors for a long time. I still feel those same feelings of, should I do this, or and I'm probably able to work through them easier now. However, they never go away. And I also tell people that is like, it's okay. They're going to be there because it's in our culture. It's conditioned in us. It's all around us, but you just have to follow your intuition. And again, not care because there's always going to be criticism. I talk about, there's always going to be somebody who doesn't agree with you or criticize you. But on the flip side of that, there's going to be somebody whose life has changed or dramatically impacted in a positive way, or you're going to spark a movement, or you're going to spark change. And it's just waiting for that moment for you to work through that fear, take that action. So
beautifully said. And Michelle, I'm just curious, where is it in your body? And I love that we're talking about it being in our bodies, because I think this is especially important for women to be able, because we are in touch, or that is a goal, to be really in touch with our bodies. And that's the place that tells us.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, or I know, how about that? I know for me that it feels like physically like a tingle. And so I
Oh,
think, yeah, I think and it feels like I guess what I would say is almost that difference between a little bit of the heavy right before the lightness, right? The freedom of having stepped out and done what your intuition is telling you to do. And so I really love the way both of you have framed it. I'm actually feeling tingly right now, so this is an amazing conversation. And you know what? I was going to just suggest to our fellow disruptors a pro tip, which is one of my very favorite things that I think I've heard in this lifetime so far. A little bit to Tracy's description: fear actually feels the same as excitement in your body. And so it really is, to me, recognizing that feeling and being also mindful of the way that I am layering my experiences on top of that feeling, right? So it's, I think, our experiences that cause us to feel that tingle as fear
right,
versus different experiences that can cause us to feel that tingle as excitement. And so
right.
I choose excitement every day of the week.
Well, I love that, and I have a friend who is just an amazing. He's an author. His name is James Lapine, and he's a Broadway director. And he tells his actors, "I know you feel like you're nervous, but you're really excited." And I've thought of that
Love it.
reframing of that. How powerful is that? So thank you for saying that, because I
I love
love
it.
being reminded, and I have had those moments, because of James, and now because of what you just said. I love those moments, like, I much prefer to feel excited than scared.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yay.
If it's a choice, let's choose. I agree.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, let me ask you a quick question, then we can
Yeah.
dig in. So, Debbie, before pursuing your coaching career,
Yes.
right? And so,
Yeah.
we're going to talk about your
Yeah.
pioneering vision for
Yeah.
what you're doing now. But you were, as we noted, a reporter for the Columbus Citizen Journal, a
Yeah.
deputy press secretary to former U.S. Senator John Glenn, an executive television
Yeah.
producer. I mean, on and
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
So, with so
Exhausting.
much,
Is that exhausting?
look,
It
it's
makes me tired to remember it.
well, you have lived it. It's almost
Yeah.
exhausting just to talk about how amazing you are. So I can only imagine.
Thank you.
Now, with so much success, though, in that, maybe in that space in your life, in that early part of your career, maybe you can help us understand, was there a pivotal moment that
Yeah.
really inspired you to change your
Yeah.
path
Yeah.
towards the coaching space?
Yeah. Well, as you can imagine, I was pretty young when I did all that. It was really up until I was 40. And so while I was successful in a professional sense, I was unsuccessful in a personal, to me, on a personal side. I was exhausted. I was burned out. I was getting divorced. I had a horrific loss in my life. I loved my mother-in-law. She was my best friend, and she died. So I was suffering from grief, getting divorced, and burned out, exhausted, and was kind of crawling to the finish line at age 40 of what is my next career. And so I stopped. It was really pivotal to say, wait a minute, what is it I really want to do with my life? And I remember reading something that was like, well, peace is really the goal. And I was like, oh my God, how does one get peace? I felt successful in the traditional sense, but unsuccessful, as I was not peaceful. I was not content. And so that was the pivotal moment of stopping and saying, wait a minute, how can I, really get in touch with myself? And it wasn't a pretty picture. It was hard, and it was sad, and it was really frustrating. And I went to therapy. That was, of course, a great start. I began to read some of these amazing spiritual books. Thich Nhat Hanh's Peace is Every Step was the first book that I read. And it was, in the first chapter, is about how to drink a cup of tea mindfully. And I thought that was the craziest thing. I was like, I could never just, soak in a drinking a cup of tea. I had to down it, and just turning my life around, which I did at age 40. I'm 67 now, and I'm just so glad I did, because in terms of the richness of my life, really changed by balancing my life with, what do I want to do professionally in the world? How do I want to make a difference? But then balancing it with, how can I be emotionally, spiritually, psychologically balanced with that career.
Mm, love that. I think that is great insight, because I think you run into people all the time who are not happy with their careers,
Right.
or, and it's also hard at that age, Debbie. I can imagine at that age, because I remember when I changed my career. My first time I changed my career, I was in my late 20s, and the response was, it wasn't that I couldn't do it or anything like that. It's like, why would you do that after
Right.
spending all this time and all
Right.
this money and your
Right.
education? And so
Right.
it's a
Right.
little bit of like, all of a sudden you're going to do a big pivot, and people
Right.
don't always get it, but they also remain, in unhappy situations, whether it's a job or a career, for year after year, without
Right.
finding kind of that personal fulfillment that they can
Right.
bring into the work. And I bring into my work, and I know you do too, is this
Right.
mission driven work. It feels like I'm working, but I'm also making a difference at the same
Right.
time. And that's the
Right.
kind of space that feels really good.
Right. Well, exactly. And you raise a really good point. It is really important to surround yourself with people who do understand you, get you, and will support you no matter what you're going through. And we've all heard the phrase, you're as good as the 5 people that you keep closest to you.
Ooh,
But I take that very, very seriously. I really surround myself only with people who are supportive. And that does not mean that everybody is a yes person or everybody's just, it just simply means they have my best, they
yeah.
have my good, and they can hear me. And so that's one of those pro tips or strategies to pay attention to, because you will always find people to Shanghai your dreams, always. And they'll do it in really subtle ways. Like you were saying, they'll be like, oh, well, didn't you, or wasn't that, or I thought that was a good job. And then it just kind of erodes what we need to do. I speak at Ohio State every year to a group of 100 or so promising young women who are transitioning, from college into their work life. And one of the things that I've learned over the years to always say to them, you have a major, but you do not have to stick with it. And every time they're like this, because
Yeah.
I learned right away that was a really sticking point, that
Wow.
young people feel like, okay, I've majored in sports marketing, so now that's what I'm locked into doing. And they're always so shocked, because we, to be deeply fulfilled, we can't even predict the kinds of jobs or the kinds of requirements or the kind of exciting things that are going to be out there for you. And so I'm always saying to the people that I coached, whatever's in front of you that's inspiring, go explore that, because it doesn't have to be your major in college.
And it can
Exactly.
turn your head right at a different time in your life. I mean, there's just so much about your own personal journey and being attuned to that, I think, that then allows you, right, to open your eyes to what some of those options or opportunities are.
Right.
And I think
Right.
at the most very fundamental level. So basically, our fellow disruptors, from hearing a bit about me earlier on in our podcast series, and also just from, me soapboxing on every episode that we record, know that I am squarely within what both of you are describing, having been through, right? I call it my midlife awakening, or my, adult developmental stage, right? Of figuring
Good.
out, like, who am I? What's my voice? And what impact do I want to leave? And it's been just the most beautiful experience. Love the idea of surrounding yourself, or like really taking account of those 5 people that you're closest
Yeah.
to. I think I could tick them off one hand very quickly, and every single one to a T are just like, elevators taking me, up and
Yeah.
higher.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what I really love is hearing, this part of this conversation that we talk about too on the podcast, which is about, and I love the way, pardon me, you address these women at Ohio State, like the idea of giving people permission, right? Of really thinking outside of maybe a box, or
Yeah.
thinking off the ladder, or thinking in unique ways, and thinking about definitions that they can, kind of grab and address success for
Right.
themselves.
Right. Right. Right.
So kudos to you for giving, up and coming women leaders that permission to really explore.
Well, thank you for saying that. And at the same time, your real original question is, basically, how did I become a coach? Because when I became a coach, I simply started doing what I wanted for myself. And there was nothing, there was no field of coaching. Professional athletes, Olympic athletes had coaches, but the basic human being didn't have a coach. And
Mhm.
so I didn't know there wasn't a profession. I simply started I got to 40 and I was like, wait a minute. Life is too hard, especially for women. And even at that time, things have changed a bit for women. It's still not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And it was just worse, 27 years ago for women. And I kept feeling like women didn't get the memo. Women didn't get we needed more support in a lot of times. And Tracy's a great example of this. You're the first woman to become
Yeah.
something. And we didn't get schooled in it. And we just got thrown in it and had to know how to operate. And so after my experience, which I love being a reporter. I love being a press secretary. I ran this television production company and learned a lot about business, a lot about startups, a lot about the world of entertainment. And I had all this knowledge, and I was thinking, how much better would I have been if I would have had some other expertise just guiding me? So I just started doing for other people. And it was about 6 months later. I didn't even know what I was doing, but my clients who hired me loved it. I loved it. And it was just really strategizing with them on being healthy, happy, and deeply satisfied.
Mm.
And it was 6 months later. So I found out there was actually this field of life and executive coaching that was started by a guy named Thomas Leonard. And it was just a gift in 1996 to find that, it was actually a profession. And what was interesting at the time, coaching was so unknown that I would explain to my friends, I'm coaching and this is what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. And my friends would go, that sounds good. That sounds good. And then they would go, I just never knew you were interested in sports. And I'd be like, oh my God, I cannot explain this thing. Am I going to be able to do this thing? Because I can't explain it. And then Thomas Leonard said to me, because I literally tearfully went to him and I said, I don't know how to tell people what I do. And he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, in 5 years, he laughed and he said, in 5 years, people won't ask, what's a coach? They'll ask, who is your coach? And look at you, I know at least one of you has a coach, which is really good. Yeah. So, and that was very, very disruptive because the pushback on being a coach is when people would push me back, they'd be like, well, you should be able to do that on your own. And I'm like, well, if you were able to do it on your own, people would be doing it, but they're not. And when they got a coach and they're paying for it, they tend to do it, Yeah. So again, when you're a disruptor, you're going to get pushed back a lot. Mm-hmm. And so the support of others who get what you're trying to do is really essential, because there was no doubt in my mind. I even had a client say to me, I said, oh, what I'm actually doing with you is I'm actually coaching you. It's a whole profession. And my client literally said to me, he goes, that is disgusting. That is demeaning. And that is beneath you. Do not call yourself a coach. But I knew inside, I was like, no, he's wrong. I don't care.
Where do you think, okay, so that's interesting. Where do you think that, his view that it was disgusting and demeaning came from?
Who knows? I think he was the head of an investment banking firm. And so I think he was feeling like he had a highfalutin, I was being paid a significant amount of money. I think he thought he had a highfalutin, consultant. But when I named myself a coach to him, I don't know, maybe he's thinking Little League or something. I don't know. But it didn't matter, because again, when you're doing the right thing. My own therapist said to me, because I was telling him, I said, I think I'm going to move forward with this coaching practice. I'm really enjoying it. And he said to me, coaching smoaching. He thought it was just silly, my therapist. And I remember, again, I was like, no, he's wrong. Because internally I was like, oh my God, if this profession takes off, it will help so many people. There will be parenting coaches. There'll be grief coaches. There'll be self-esteem coaches. There'll be book coaches. There'll be all these people who will help us in the moment that we need help. And so I so believed in that internally that no matter what people said to me, I didn't care. I just didn't. So I don't know. That's just one of my quirks.
I think you said a couple of things that are super important there. One is everybody's going to give you advice around when you're doing something, particularly when it's pivoting, it's doing something that's not the norm. Like everybody's going to have an opinion about that. But you felt internally, again, intuitively, you felt, okay, this is not advice I should be taking. And it may come from somebody you respect, like your therapist. It may come from somebody you would normally take advice from, but you get that advice and it doesn't feel right. And paying attention to that, because that's really important as you're moving into more purposeful work, is, okay, does that feel right? I don't know how many people have, when I named my LLC Disrupt the Landing and using the word disruption, how many people have told me that is absolutely the wrong thing to do? You should not be doing that. That is a bad word. People will run from that. And it's like, all this kind of advice, they'd be just like, ooh, or, and depending on who they were, I mean, a lot of things went into that, their opinions, but it was like, but internally it felt right. It felt like that's who I am. That's who, that's what this is. And when everything inside me and my heart is drawing me that direction, I need to pay attention to that first and foremost, no matter what. And there were people who were definitely supportive, like Michelle, who had my back, and others. But they were all, there was a lot of opinions. So when you do get into that space of really leaning into something that feels right, and you're starting to move into a disruptive place or a pivot or whatever, you're going to get a lot of incoming. Even when you've encircled yourself with, those 5 people, there's going to be people that when you asked for it or not, they're going to give you their
right. That's the other part, whether you ask for it or not. Tracy, I love that. And that's so powerful. And I can imagine. And I remember when you were telling me about disruption, it so fit you, because you've disrupted the industries that you've been in. You've disrupted so much. I think about your story so often, and it's so perfect for you. So yay for you. And I'm glad you didn't listen to anybody else.
And look, like maybe there's a way to find some of that unsolicited response helpful. Like I could see, maybe Debbie, like your next iteration, right, of like a tagline. I like coaching schmooching. I think that's really catchy. Like maybe you can use that,
I need to hire you. Would you coach
very
me?
Good. I'm like a 20-year lawyer who's very good at marketing because I have no idea what I'm doing. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
No, you're the best. You've got a clean mind because you've been in another industry for a while. That's great. Awesome.
Yes. If we have some time, I'll tease up for our disruptive listeners. I do want to talk about a little bit of marketing angle. It's a quote that you, Debbie, gave us at the Travel Women's Wisdom Retreat. And I actually have it on like a cute little like chalkboard thing in my kitchen. Tracy knows what I'm talking about. So I'll tease it up. I'll tease it up now. And then if everybody sticks around, we can get to it a little bit later. How about that?
Awesome. I don't know what it is.
No, it's lovely.
I'm not responsible for anything I say. I have said in the past.
Unless it's really good and then you want to take full credit.
Right,
no,
exactly.
Absolutely.
That's so funny.
So like how did it go at the very beginning, right? Like really jumping into this kind of non-existent, as we've kind of described it, career and being a pioneer in this space. I mean, was it,
how'd you get people to pay you?
Well, you know something, it was incredible. It was one of those things. Well, remember, for coaches with an individual practice, you really need, depending on what you only have a bandwidth to do. For me, I had a bandwidth to do 20 clients or so. And then, and I priced it accordingly because because of my background, I knew what people paid for consulting. And I said to myself, if I had because remember, I created what I wanted for me, what would I pay them? And I knew how high I would go on what I would pay them. And I just started charging that right out of the box. Got it right out of the box, which was very, very fortunate. And so I actually started out as a coach for $200 an hour.
Mhm.
And so I made a very good living right out of the box, and back in 1995, 96, 97. And so I only needed a handful of clients. One person told another, told another. So I was very fortunate on that front. Then people would come to me and they would say, "Oh my God, so and so has become a coach," as though the world is super small and that if one person's a coach, another person can't be. And I'm like, thank God. Yay. I want to know who that person is, because if a lot of people don't become coaches, this won't become a viable profession. And so I was, and now it's just such a joy. And it's actually, when I speak to a crowd, sometimes I will ask, if it's 300 people, I'll say, is there anybody in this room who's not heard of Life and Executive Coaches? The last time I asked that, 2 people in the room of, 300 people. And
Wow.
it's so cool to me because I'm like, yes. So that was really part of it. You didn't need that many clients to make a living. And then it just kind of snowballed. And then of course, because I've been a coach for so long, I really morphed into finding like, who are my perfect clients. I started out with 80% men, 20% women.
Mm.
And then in a 4-month period, I flip-flopped my coaching practice. I started referring my men, either transitioning them out, and not because I don't love men, because I do, and I've had some amazing clients. It's just I knew my perfect sweet spot were women, and I wanted to work with women and give them the leg up. And I in 4 months, I flip-flopped it to 80-20 women.
Oh, nice.
Very early on. And then shortly after that, I started Women on Fire to try to affect more women on a more kind of global level.
Mm-hmm.
What did you find as the big difference as you really realized where, as you say, your sweet spot was?
Well, I think it's just because I personally enjoyed it. I have to tell you, it was less complicated working with men. They would tend to just kind of it was less complicated. But it was less interesting to me. Women were much more complex, and I really liked. I felt, I just felt like I want to do something for the sisterhood, and big issues around the fear of so many of us stepping out, where the men I was working with, for the most part, not all of them, but for the most part, just didn't have any fear of that. And perfectly enjoyable to work with. It just wasn't as much of a challenge. And I wanted to do something for women. And I was like, oh, men are, they're lucky. They've got, they kind of got a leg up already. And it's true. And, if you're a white man, you have a leg up. And, so it just was a personal enjoyment, which is why I always say, no matter what profession you're in, if you have any choice, who are the people you want to attract, and how do you, who is it you want to help in the world? And I want to help women.
Yeah. Some of also, I think sometimes things like that come to you even while you're already doing another job. So I would ask you, Debbie, were you already kind of coaching? I found myself in situations where people, because I was the only one, whether I was the only woman or the only queer woman at an executive level, was a little bit of like, how did you do this? And, how can you help me? Or what are some tips? They felt more, even more comfortable coming to me rather than having to go, ask typically their straight male manager or whatever it might be.
Right.
But it was really like, I love the connection with people and being able to help people and help elevate people. Was that something that you were already kind of doing in your profession, and then you took it out of the current profession you were in?
Well, Tracy, it's such a brilliant point and such a good point, because that is it. Because, I was a reporter and then I was a press secretary, which is kind of the inverse of being a reporter. Because you're interfacing with a politician to the press. And then I ran, a company in a business situation. So it was all of that was so different. I literally did sit down and I said to myself, what's the common thread of all those? Is there a common thread? And the common thread was very similar to yours. I really cared in all of those jobs, the people who were around me. I love seeing them succeed. I love helping them figure out, how do I, take the next step? And it was kind of inspiring and enlightening to me. I was like, ooh, there was a common thread in everything that I did and loved. So
Yeah.
really, really good point. And, when I listened to your story, Tracy, I could just, yours was around humanity. Like you were just serving humanity, and to be the safest you could be. Because I'm always listening to people's stories. And when you were sharing yours with the different jobs that you did, I could see the thread for you. I don't know what you would say about that.
Yeah. No, I agree. That's one of the reasons I asked you, because I tell people that you will a lot of times just find your purpose or what is really personally drawing you right where you're at. It's like you might even be doing it, but you just don't recognize it.
No.
Right?
Right. And that's why working with a coach, I'm just an advocate for coaching, or advocate for, there's so many different ways to get at what you're doing, but isolation is the dream killer. And when we just are trying to figure stuff out ourselves, it just is so hard. The people around us can see us.
Yeah.
And so, because it is so close to us. And I want to just share a super quick story of one of my clients was a lawyer. He was being forced into retirement at age 65, which just seems crazy now in, this day and age. But, whatever, 15, 20 years ago, this guy was like, this was terrible. And he was like, what am I going to do? And I asked him to have his closest friends, and he ended up and wrote to 40 people, 38 responded, and to say, what are my gifts, strengths, and talents, and what should I be doing? And then I collected all that data from all of his friends, and he looked at it and he was totally disbelieving. He's like, great, I should be a Broadway producer. How am I going to do that? And the really great thing was, I was a coach, so I know what to do next.
Yeah.
Because everybody saw it. He was very involved in music. He was on this board and that board, and he's very involved in theater, and he wrote about shows, and he ended up and became a Broadway producer. And the really cool part is he kept it going until he got in on the ground floor of Wicked. Oh, what I forgot to tell you was he's like, I'll never make as much money as being a lawyer. And I'm like, you don't know, you could win the lottery, whatever. Well, of course, with, he was able to be a producer of Wicked and made more money. He told me he made more money in 1 month from residuals than he did from his entire year of salary as a lawyer.
Wow. Oh, that's amazing.
But
yeah, I know. Isn't that cool?
So cool.
Talk about disrupting. So he's disrupting what we think of retirement.
Exactly. And I love that. That's something I recommend people do too, because if people you're really close to, who really know you, they see you, and you'll start communicating to people like what you see in them, and they'll be like, really, you see that in me?
Right.
It's like, well, it's coming out of you, like,
right.
all the time. Like, so this is great advice where I think especially people close to you, ask them how they see you and what they see your gifts and your skills. And we don't normally have those conversations with people close to us.
I know, and it's so simple.
Us and have that conversation.
Yeah. Something like even at the dinner table with your kids, like you guys could just take, like you could just sit around the table with your kids and say, what do you see as our gifts, strengths, and talents? And everybody can go around the room. And it's so fun because even your kids will see what your gifts, strengths, and talents are, and they'll share that with you. And I just say this over and over, and it's, not to be a broken record, but isolation just kills your dreams, because you can't have most people can't have their dreams because they can't see them. And when you ask other people to tell you what they are, they know it. And then just like you said, Tracy, it emboldens you and strengthens you to do it.
Well, and I would say, that is, again, I was going to say not to harp on, but why not? Let's harp on it. I think that's,
I love this about you.
Experience, at least that certainly I've had, and I know talking to a lot of close friends and other female colleagues that women typically have, which is, maybe a more self-deprecating, right? A diminishing of your skills, your talents, your values, a hubris that we're also, I mean, a hubris is good, of course, but at the same time, we are not, I wouldn't say nearly as stereotypically prone to, just like sing our own praises and, spout our own talents as maybe, a male counterpart is.
Right.
I have found almost like for me, it's still difficult, number one, to take a compliment, but I'm learning at the, tender age of 40 plus, but also it's just almost overwhelming when you have somebody else reflect back to you what they see.
Right.
And it can just
Right.
give you such an expanded, I think, perspective, not only of maybe yourself, but also of what you could be capable of.
Right.
And so I love initiating that conversation. It's so great.
Exactly. Thank you for saying that because so I have a new partner and he's amazing. And he was giving me a compliment the other night and then he raised with me, I didn't take it in. And I teach this. And so, awareness is everything. So I'm really glad, Michelle, that you raised just being aware of it, just being aware that it's really difficult to take in a compliment and those things that people say, because when people reflect who you are, it really is like your lifeblood to do those things that are hard or to do those things that you really want to do in the world. And I often say too, is that, 90% of an issue is solved when you're aware of it. And then the 10% is like, okay, I'm going to choose to take in this compliment. So you've already done the hard work just by being aware of it. So kudos to you.
Well, I am painfully aware of how terrible I am at taking a compliment. So
we all have to keep reminding ourselves. And, and I was really glad when Jim said that to me the other night. And I was like, wow, even when we study this, work it, it's our work. We because we've been so conditioned to be nice and not take it, not take yourself too seriously and, not brag and all of that stuff. And that got ingrained in us, really, really early on.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's also good, again, I'll offer another pro tip. Thank you, period, full stop, is an actual complete sentence. So we can all practice, without, where I would typically say thank you, but, and insert, some nonsense after that. So. Well, so I have a question about you brought up, Debbie, a few times this impact of isolation. And for anybody who isn't aware, we are coming off of a period of intense isolation, born from a global pandemic over the past few years. And so one thing, and I'm not saying this is necessarily related, but I think your focus on where I see the antidote to isolation, right, being community.
Yeah.
I think you've indicated that that your organization, which you've mentioned, Women on Fire, was something that came to you or kind of was your brainchild after several of your coaching clients you noticed were suffering from isolation, right?
Right.
And when you brought them together and just saw the profound impact of simply being in community, right? And sharing, I think it was meeting each other and sharing what they were really on fire about. Like that's kind of how, this approach came to you. So can you tell us more about how you build community and maybe how maybe you made, it sounds like you made coaching scalable, right? By bringing people together in community.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is just something that anybody can do, even if it's just one other person. I mean, when I was just had an individual private coaching practice, one of the things that I always asked my women was, do you have a best friend? Do you have somebody you can confide in? Because you can create community with one other person. And we're all so busy. And especially if you have children, it's so hard because we're so busy. But putting time, energy, and effort into a community, whether that is a best friend, one other person, or you get 3 people together, but it's different from just going out and playing pickleball or doing whatever people do now. It's really about an intentional community. I have a community that we call the Trillium, and it's 2 other women, very accomplished. I love them very much. Their names are Mary and Ellen, and they're just brilliant women. We come together as a Trillium, and we just say, here's what's going on that's a challenge for me. Here's what I need help with. And we're our own little group, and that's just one of many communities that I'm a part of. And it's very in flux. We live in different places. We can do Zoom, we can do phone, we can do text to each other. But I just always encourage women, take the time and the intention and create whatever community you want, just to be able to be safe, to talk about your dreams, to talk about your challenges. And again, with people that you trust and respect. So while I created Women on Fire that, is much, much larger, it is deeply rewarding because there's a set of, there's a culture inside of Women on Fire. We sometimes women will come into Women on Fire and they'll go, well, there's no criticism there. It's kind of like if nobody's criticizing anybody, nothing gets done. And I'm like, yeah, there's not. So it sounds to me like you need a different kind of an organization. And I've had that multiple times, because women think that to get anywhere, they kind of have to be criticized. I mean, sometimes some women think that, but it's the, unconditional, or, it's unconditional regard and support and just uplifting each other, in whatever way you want to create that, in whatever way, because we don't have time, to devote great amounts of time often to relationships. But I just encourage people to create their own community that makes them feel seen and heard and understood and supported.
Yeah. Isn't that too such a learned, and I'd like to think that maybe it's a bit bygone, hopefully at this point, right? Because we have so much around, like straightening each other's crowns, right? So, but how much of a learned experience has it been in a women's, like the collective women's history, that you have to, tear other people down, right? Or that we're stepping on the shoulders of, and not in like a positive way, in an elevation way. But instead, moving into this, I hope, and what I feel, new space of abundance, maybe rather than scarcity, and like we can all succeed, and the better we all do, right? The better we all do. So.
Oh no, exactly. And honestly, the two of you are younger than me, and it makes me, I feel so encouraged with what you're doing. This wouldn't have been even maybe 10 years ago. And I just, yes. And I have such hope and faith in especially women, who are younger. I do hear from my Women on Fire, they'll go, well, I went to this or that, it's just not Women on Fire. And I'm like, I know. So, go create that inside that organization. You know the kind of skills to uplift. I love the whole idea about straightening your crown. The kind of skills that, go deliver that to them and just see if some people are attracted to that. So unfortunately, we do know that some of that, kind of jealousy or tearing people down. I was in California. I lived in California in January and February this year. And I went to this amazing event, and we were learning to create these beautiful flower arrangements. And it was just so fun for me because I'm so like, that is not like my gift, but I'm loving it. And honestly, you guys, and these women were all, like they were educated, they were wealthy, they were so mean to each other. I was shocked. They were just mean.
Flower arrangements?
Yeah, they were just saying, they would just say not nice things to each other. And I just took it in as like an experiment, and I go, I think that's beautiful. And, very few people could take in the compliment, but and I was like, wow, this just still goes on out there where women are really kind of, like there are some issues with women not being nice to each other. And it made me sad more than anything.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they thought I was a Pollyanna, and I'm like, yay, I hope they do. Because I am. Should have thought, what's wrong with this one?
Like, she's actually happy. Like, what? How does this happen?
Yeah, I'm like, we're with flowers and it's beautiful. And, anyway, it's out there, and all of us just, in this space, the space you're in, just being a force for good is, Yeah. Well, I love what you said, if we're all better, we'll do better, and you're doing it. So thank you.
That's right.
So much of that sounds like what we have heard from Tracy. I love, like, the idea of community and getting together through collective action, right? And then being able to take what you learn, what you grow within that community that's really of support, and then infusing it into these other institutions and systems and, spaces that, like, let's face it, could all use, like, quite an uplift. So
exactly, Michelle. Yeah,
I love it. That's right. Well, so Debbie, let's talk about your book then, Women on Fire. So, and how many books have you written?
There's a series, so there's a book series of two, and they are a compilation book. So there's a total of 41 stories of women
Oh.
who struggled with all the common struggles, everything from getting divorced, coming out.
Mhm.
Um, I wrote about grief in mine, finding your passion, all the things that we struggle. It was women who struggled, and then the strategies they used to be successful. And the idea was just to inspire people that we all have similar struggles, more or less, and that women have come before us and solved it. And when we come together, we can solve it together. So that was the idea. It was really fun. It amazes me. My partner and I were at a dinner the other night, and there was a man there, and he's like, I want to buy your book, and I'm like, oh, I'll send it to you. He goes, no, I want to buy it, and I was like, and so the book is still, one of them came out in 2009, the other one came out in 2012, and we still sell copies of them, and it just makes me so happy because I just want women to feel, and men too, to feel the support of they're not alone in some of these things in life.
Yeah. Well, and you've had some, I mean, well, first of all, I think, people's stories, and I feel this so strongly, are really one of their most powerful tools. And so taking those stories and sharing those is important, and having platforms to do that.
Yeah.
You provide a platform to do that. How important is it to you, is the aspect of sharing impactful stories? What really led you to do
Yeah.
that? And
Yeah.
what is the why behind it? What did you think these
Yeah.
stories would do?
Yeah. Well, I actually got to the books from doing events in New York. So in 2003, I started Women on Fire Teas in New York. And the idea was I was going to have, which I did, I would have a guest speaker come. And so this would be no more than like 17, 19 women. The conversation was facilitated. What are you on fire about? And what do you need support for? And with a guest speaker. And the guest speaker would speak for 15 minutes. Everybody could ask questions. What I noticed after about 6 or 8 tea parties, and again, I'm getting an outside speaker who, is accomplished in some way and paid them to come. But what I noticed is everybody was super polite to the speaker. They would listen to the speaker. And then I would say, oh, does anybody have questions? Maybe 1 or 2 people would ask questions,
Yeah.
but then they would go back to each other, talking to each other. And I was like, And then, of course, as they went around the table and would share what they were on fire about, or what they were fire about, simmering about, or burned out about, and what they needed help with, I noticed they were mesmerized by each other's stories. I'm like, wait a minute, we don't need a guest speaker. We just need to share each other's stories. And then that became so powerful because people wanted to hear other people's stories.
Mhm.
And then the books grew from that. But and then in the bigger Women on Fire events, again, I do a dynamic speaker. And Tracy, I so want you. I already have you in my mind. I'm like, I want Tracy as the next Women on Fire speaker. The last one was Marianne Williamson. So that puts you in a good category. People were mesmerized by Marianne, but let me tell you, their favorite thing of the retreat, and I always tell the guest speaker, don't be offended. They love you, but their favorite thing of the retreat are circles, which are 8 women sharing their stories. For 10 years, I've done this. I stopped during COVID, and haven't resumed these annual events. But in all those 10 years, circles are everybody's favorite because they want to hear each other's stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you can see yourself, I think, sometimes a little more readily in a story that maybe you feel hits a little bit closer to home. Like, I mean, I'm all for a very notable, maybe famous activist or advocate, and like just envisioning, right? Like, who could I be? Yeah. But then there's an element of, again, permission and an element of community, right? And just support in where you are, I think, in listening to somebody who's a lot like you.
Right.
So I love that.
Right. Also, I think the capability, like when people hear what other people go through in life, sometimes it puts it in perspective. You might be, any of us could be like, oh man, I've got it so tough, blah, blah, blah. And then you hear or you learn from somebody else. And if you're in a safe space and you can, and Tracy knows all about that, you can really, I mean, people will share at a very deep level.
Yeah.
And they do. And I also ask them to share with each other in that group the thing that they're the proudest of. And, I mean, I remember we had one woman say, I gave my kidney to my brother, but I never told anybody. I mean, the brother knew, of course, but, because because as women too, we don't get a chance to go, I'm really proud. And this is not about what you're proud about your kid, unless your kid's an Olympic ice skater, then you can be proud. But this is like you, like, what are you proud of for yourself? And I mean, when that woman said that, well, I gave him my kidney, but I didn't tell anybody. It's like, you should be like shouting that from the rooftop,
Yeah.
Not should, but
No, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
and saying it the first time just makes it easier to say it the second time, and then the 14th
Yeah.
time, and then the 105th time. So I love
Right,
that.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Well, you've done over 100 interviews. So what have been some of your most memorable? I mean,
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Give us some
Oh my
good
gosh.
stuff.
Oh my gosh, I'll give you some good stuff. I have so many. Well, first of all, I mean, just the wide range of people. And of course, it's always, the more famous people are really super fun. I live on Martha's Vineyard for much of the time, and I had lived here full time for 20 years. So I have the great fortune to know some really, really interesting people. One of those is Carly Simon, the singer. And do you guys know, you guys know her, right? Because even now, it's amazing to me. Like, a lot of time, especially younger people are like, no, I don't know who that is. Anyway, I'm very lucky. And so Carly and I were kind of like, we were like, not lying on the sofa, but snuggled into the sofa doing the interview. And what was hilarious is I said to her, I'm kind of nervous. And she goes, you're nervous. I'm always the most nervous person in the room. And she goes, why are you nervous? And it was like just this kind of fun, relaxed. But what I was so happy about is just to be able to share who she really is in the world with my audience. That always feels so good, because she's such a tender soul, and she's very youthful, and she's in her late 70s. And I just wanted to share her because she's just amazing. And if you're with her, she's most often singing. Like, she will, if we're together, she will be like Debbie, and and she'll go, Ma King, and I'll go, Carly, I can't sing. She'll go, Bird, yeah. And it's just like, and you're like, I can't believe this, and I want to share this with everybody. So Carly was super fun.
Was that your first ever studio recording, by the way? Because you just sang on mic and we recorded you.
Definitely.
So,
Definitely.
Make sure this one to Carly too.
Right. You can only do the 7 seconds or whatever that. Your poor audience ears, because I cannot sing. I can't sing. Carly's determined to teach me, but I can't. But
see, look, I think it's also the words we use. Like, I would say something similar, but I would say I can sing. It's just not well, or it's not well received by other people's ears. But
see,
Tracy knows I can sing.
I want to hear you both. I want to see you do Mockingbird, the two of you. But
I would never want to steal your thunder. We'll do it after we stop recording.
Oh, you guys are adorable. You guys are so cute. Because I was a press secretary and I was from Ohio, and Gloria Steinem was from Ohio, I was super fortunate to know her very early on in my career. And I learned so much from her. She truly is, she's truly worth any respect, reverence that any of us could have for her. She's a wonderful, wonderful person. And to know her through the years, and to have, and the interview that I did with her was deeply touching, because I had known her for 30 years, and I had told her a story about how she had affected me, because she was so elegant. She really taught me a lot about being a woman working out in the world, because if she is with you, you are her only concern. And I was with her when I was in my early 30s, and she and I were having a very serious conversation, and two people who were famous came up and burst right through us. And because they were famous, I stepped back. And she, without skipping a beat, said to these famous people, oh, you must know Debbie Phillips. And they're like, oh, yeah. They were totally lying because Gloria is telling that. But the reason that is, I was like, wow, no matter what your altitude is in life, it's really important your attitude. And I was like, Gloria taught me in that moment, doesn't matter, you don't let somebody do that. And the elegant way that she did that, to not be interrupted and to so graciously shine the light on me, taught me such a big lesson. And so then I interviewed her, whatever, 30 years later, and I told her that story, and we both started kind of crying, tearing up. And she said, she goes, I, of course, don't remember that. And she goes, thank you for giving me the gift 30 years later to know that I did something like that. And because I wasn't aware. And like, that's the beauty of women coming together and just, sharing their hearts. So I don't even know if that story makes sense to you guys, but it was like, so she's such an amazing woman who is such a champion of women. And I saw that as a huge champion of women in that moment when she didn't let these, entitled people trample all over our, private conversation. So that was good. I totally love Nikki Giovanni, the poet. I assume you guys know her really well. She is so unapologetically herself. And I just loved her. I mean, she changed my life with, I have never, ever, ever, ever been bored in my life because, her quote around, there's always something to do. There's hungry people to feed. There's naked people to clothe. There's people to love or support. When I read that many, many, many years ago, I was like, there's always something to do. So don't you ever just think you're bored. And so in interviewing her later on, it was shortly after Trump was elected. And we did have to do a fair amount of bleeping of the interview, but it was, and I hate to do that to Nikki. We'll have some of it in. But I just loved her. She's unapologetically herself. She's just incredible. So I don't know if you guys have studied her or seen her in person, or meeting her in person is just delicious too. So those are a few of the people.
I love it. I really do.
And of course, Judy Blume. Oh my God. And I learned something from Judy Blume too. Judy Blume and I were taking a photograph. Judy's tiny. She's teeny. She's darling. And I've actually known her for several years as well. And I scrunched down to take a photo with Judy because she was asking me how to take like a selfie. And I said, oh, here's how you do it, and I'm scrunching down to her. We do the picture. And then she said to me, we're the same height, which we are, but she's so tiny that I was like fitting myself with her. And I said, oh, we are the same height. And she goes, don't ever scrunch down to, match someone else. You stand tall. And I'm like, oh my God. Okay. And I stopped doing that.
Yeah. I mean, that's life lessons in more ways than one. I love it.
I know. Judy Blume.
I love it. Well, Debbie, we're so grateful for this conversation with you. Michelle and I are so grateful that we've connected with you, that we got a chance to meet you and develop a friendship with you, and that we have this fellow female entrepreneur and pioneer in our space, fellow disruptor. Here we are together, and we feel very much in community with you. Thank you for all that you're doing to elevate women, and you've been doing that now for a very long time, and you continue to do it, and you continue to do it with such light and energy and optimism, and we're so grateful for that. It's no wonder that women really find value and are inspired by your coaching and your support. You truly are. Like, you just bring sunshine with you. We walk, and your light is, it's undeniable.
Thank you.
So thank you for your mission, your vision, all that you're doing, the work that you're doing. And we hope our listeners were inspired by this conversation today too. And I guess I'll turn it over to Michelle, and then we'll bring in the final word here in a second, Debbie.
Tracy, thank you. I so appreciate that.
Well, I'm going to take just a moment to riff off of your experience with the, estimable Gloria Steinem, when you were able to gift her the experience, right, that had been so impactful on you that maybe she didn't recall. And so, as I teased up a little bit earlier, I just wanted to let you know that, like I noted, right, in my kitchen, there is one of these, and I'm very artistic, as I've noted, right? I'm also a lawyer, yes, and I can do all the things, but I'm also very into art. And so I did this chalkboard, little placard, And the quote that I wrote on it, that's been there for, I don't know, Tracy, many, many months now,
Forever.
probably since October when I first met you and heard this, is give the universe a chance to show you I've got you. And I'll never forget the story that you told. You're welcome to tell it now, but if you don't want to dig in, we don't necessarily need to. I just will never forget the story
You
that
tell
accompanied that.
it.
Oh, I could never tell that story. I would never tell your story, but I will say I'll never forget it. And just those words, you know, as Tracy and I have embarked on so many bright and beautiful paths together, and even separately, we have consistently come back really to that quote and to that idea. And for us, or I'll speak for myself, I don't speak for Tracy, but it's just such a what is it, a statement of faith. And I find faith in, you know, in something larger than myself, but also faith in myself. And those are two things that have just been instrumental in the transformation that I've experienced very recently in my midlife awakening. So I have to thank you for that and for that inspiration.
Well, first of all, thank you, because I feel very much like Gloria in this moment. It's like, thank you for giving me back that gift, because I do think so often, you know, the universe is infinitely smarter than me, and that I have to just kind of like let go sometimes. So thank you for saying that. But more than that, thank you for being a dynamic duo. I've watched the two of you grow leaps and bounds. You get stuff done. And the way you've come together to create this podcast, to create a book, to create a movement is phenomenal. Tracy, you are one of the best speakers I have ever heard in my life. And I have heard a lot of great speakers. And so I just want to encourage both of you to just please keep giving this amazing gift to the world, because you're doing it. So thank you for that beautiful thing that you just said to me. But I am just very, very touched by what I've watched the two of you do, and just keep going. You're doing great.
Thank you. If you stay on the mission, we will stay on the mission. Is it a deal?
I think that's a deal. We're all on it. Everybody who's listening, we need us all.
Well, I think we're headed to Martha's Vineyard in the spring to
please
meet up.
do.
So we'll hug and shake on it in person.
Oh, that would be a gift. Thank you. I would love you to do that.
Of course. Well, in the meantime, we'll be sure to put all of Debbie's socials and also information regarding the new podcast, as well as Women on Fire, in our show notes for the episode. So all that's going to be there for all of our fellow disruptors to access, and then also follow along with you, Debbie, listen to you, read about you and your experiences, and potentially engage in the community that you've created that has been so, you know, just foundational, I'm sure, and fundamental for so many women.
Thank you.
And so we're just wildly excited to have learned about your disruption journey and to continue to follow along with you.
Thank you both so much. Just love you dearly.
Yes.
Well, we'll also be back for our fellow disruptors with more disruptive conversations in 2 weeks. You can find us, as always, on Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and a big highlight for YouTube, so you can actually see the awesomeness that goes on, and anywhere else that you get your podcasts. If you liked what you heard today, which I can't imagine you did not, or you're just a fan in general, reach out. Give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Let us hear some feedback, and certainly not only what we did great that you want us to keep doing, but anything that you would suggest. Solicited advice, right? That we can do better. So again, just thanks everyone for listening, and thank you, Debbie, for being with us.
You are so welcome. It was such a pleasure.
Yes. And so now it's the final call to action, Debbie. So what would you like to leave the listeners with?
I would love to leave the listeners with a big smile from the two of you. So what I would love to leave listeners with is this notion that I often journal to, which is, what is the love I still have to give to the world before I die? And so when you think of that, you know, what is the love I have to give the world? You can all think about that. But when you say before I die, because none of us ever knows, and it puts a little bit of a, you know, it shortens it, telescopes it a little bit to really think about it, because all of us have this ability to give to other people. And so that's what I would leave your beautiful listeners with.
Oh, I love it. Thank you for that. So, and then my final call to action is usually the same. It's we're calling all champions and disruptors just like us. let's assemble, let's convene, let's keep disrupting. That's what this podcast is all about, activating
Yeah.
controlled change. So, are you
Yeah.
ready to disrupt with us?